As a kid, I'd always joked with my friends and family about being born in the wrong generation. I'm a child of the 60s, I would say, a modern hippie. I listened to Jimi Hendrix and the Grateful Dead. I wore tie-dye shirts and had hair down to my shoulders. To my teenage self, the 1960s seemed like a vibrant age of creativity and free expression, a time of novel ideas fueled by hallucinogenic drugs that challenged the norm and questioned the status quo. And at that point in my life, there were two possible life outcomes: to either become a traveling musician in a rock and roll band, or to pitch a tent in the wilderness and live off the land. Well, I gave both of those things a real shot, and made the most of them while they lasted. But at some point, my hippie dreams faded, and they were replaced with more traditional goals, like a career, a salary, and a home that wasn't made out of nylon fabric. It wasn't until making the transition to graduate school here at Michigan when I realized a potential connection between my teenage dreams and a real job. In 2015, I was introduced to psychedelic research in this article by Michael Pollan in The New Yorker. He described how researchers had given magic mushrooms to patients with life-threatening cancer in an effort to reduce their anxiety surrounding death. And the overwhelmingly positive results of that study helped fuel what is now being called the psychedelic renaissance, a rebirth of the substances that played such an integral role in what made the 1960s so unique, were now legitimate topics of study in science. And at that moment, I said to myself, far out, man. And I started looking for PhD programs in psychedelic science. But before we get too off track, let's make sure we understand what this psychedelic renaissance is all about. The word psychedelic is derived from the Greek word psyche, meaning mind, and delos, meaning to make visible. Psychedelic thus translates to mind manifesting, or to reveal the mind. And psychedelics make up a class of drugs that reliably and drastically alter human consciousness, or free your mind, as they might have said in the 1960s. And the classic psychedelics include substances like LSD, magic mushrooms, and DMT. This renaissance of psychedelic research is showing us that psychedelics are able to ease symptoms of depression and anxiety for months in individuals who were previously thought to be treatment resistant. Many participants in these studies attest that their psychedelic experiences are among the top 5 most meaningful experiences of their entire lives, on par with the birth of a child or death of a family member. So today, the substances that freed the minds of an entire generation in the 1960s are now helping to free the minds of individuals with crippling mental health conditions. But as you might guess, psychedelics can also free the mind of healthy individuals too. And the psychedelic renaissance is revealing to us that these substances are extraordinary tools for scientists like me to study the mind and understand the mechanisms of consciousness itself. In order to understand how psychedelics can be useful here, we first have to attempt to understand consciousness, which is a big challenge, not just for you and me, but for all of science. Because collectively, science lacks an explanation for how the molecules, cells, and organs of our body synergistically combine to generate this all-encompassing experience that we call consciousness. And it's not just our mind's eye. Consciousness is the essence of what it means to be human. It is the stage for any and all experiences that will ever happen in our entire lives. And without it, everything we know ceases to exist. Yet despite its fundamental importance, the mysteries of consciousness remain as the ultimate unsolved mystery of science. So where do psychedelics fit in? Well, as a scientist, you learn that a good way to improve your understanding of something is to alter it. And psychedelics are among the most powerful tools for altering consciousness that we know of. With modern neuroscience tools, we can now measure exactly what's happening in the brain of an individual over the course of a controlled but radical shift in consciousness. And this shift in consciousness is also coupled with a profound, meaningful, and personal subjective experience. So we now have the ability to precisely quantify the physiological and neurological changes that are associated with this intensely subjective altered state, which provides a fascinating new path towards studying consciousness in entirely new ways. Longtime researcher Dr. Stanislav Grof once said, "Psychedelics are for the mind what the microscope is for biology and the telescope is for astronomy." He was suggesting that psychedelics, like the microscope or telescope, have the potential to reveal realms of reality that were previously invisible to the naked eye. They provide a powerful lens for us to study and examine the mind in entirely new ways. But what if our bodies readily and naturally produced its own psychedelic substance? Might you be interested in how that substance relates to consciousness? Well, for the last several decades, scientists have known that to be true. Your body, my body, and all mammals for that matter, naturally produce a psychedelic substance called N,N-dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. DMT is a small molecule in our body whose molecular structure is incredibly similar to the structure of the neurotransmitter serotonin. And the fascinating thing is that even though we know so much about how critical serotonin is for the regulation of mood and brain function, science knows next to nothing about the role that DMT might be playing in the body. And what's more, DMT seems to be nearly ubiquitous in nature. Not only is it present across the animal kingdom, DMT is naturally produced by hundreds, if not thousands, of species of plants. And when I first learned that, my inner flower child transcended. So that's where I come back. My dreams of becoming a traveling hippie and selling out music festivals didn't exactly pan out. But I found a job researching psychedelics and studying one of the most fascinating topics I could have ever imagined. My PhD work is focused on the study of DMT in the body and the role that it may play in brain function and consciousness. In other words, what is this psychedelic compound doing floating around in our body? And can it provide clues as to the mysteries of the mind? To answer that, we should look at how DMT affects consciousness. When taken in its pure form, DMT brings about altered states of consciousness reminiscent of other psychedelics. Visual hallucinations, distortions of reality, altered perception of time and space. But the DMT experience is said to exist in an entirely separate domain relative to those of the other psychedelics. Within usually less than 30 seconds of DMT ingestion, the user is catapulted through a visually immersive, kaleidoscopic labyrinth of vibrant and shifting geometry, and then plunged into a seemingly alternate and otherworldly dimension, a realm of space that was previously unfathomable to the mind. And this coincides with the feeling of complete and utter disembodiment from the physical self, oftentimes forgetting that their body even exists. And during that brief stint in this alien realm, users report communication with higher intelligences, confrontations with death, and an overwhelming feeling of the experience being more real than real. But within a matter of about 10 minutes, the effects will have almost completely subsided, and normal waking consciousness resumes. So that just begs the question, if that's what happens when we consume DMT, then what in the world is it doing in our body? Early guesses propose that DMT might act as a schizotoxin, or substance responsible for the hallucinatory effects of schizophrenia. Other guesses suggested that DMT might be involved in dreaming consciousness, states of spiritual or religious mysticism, or near-death experiences. Our work here at Michigan is aiming to not only understand the brain effects of the DMT experience, but also to understand the basic role that DMT might play in day-to-day physiological functions. But the short answer is, science currently has almost no grasp about what DMT might be doing in the body. But the fact that it's withstood generations of human evolution and remained a part of our own physiology to this day suggests that it's here for a reason. And of all the psychedelics being investigated for their consciousness-altering effects and therapeutic benefits, DMT is the most widespread in nature, and the only psychedelic known to be endogenous to humans, or naturally produced by us. And since it's produced by us, it may be a part of a yet undiscovered natural hallucinogenic system within our body, a system that becomes activated at certain times to regulate perception or bring about altered states of consciousness. Or perhaps this system plays some role in our ability to receive or experience the effects of other psychedelics, like LSD or magic mushrooms. Or perhaps DMT is in fact involved in our normal perception of reality, and its dysfunction contributes to psychiatric hallucinatory disorders. All of these are possible, but nothing is yet proven. But I believe that the mystery of DMT deserves the attention of scientists, philosophers, psychologists, therapists, and anyone interested in trying to make sense of the situation we call reality. So I'd now like to summarize with a quote by the founder of American psychology, William James, who over a century ago advocated for the importance of studying altered states of consciousness. He said that our normal waking consciousness is but one special type of consciousness. Whilst all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different. No account of the universe in its totality can be final, which leaves these other forms of consciousness quite disregarded. Through self-experimentation, William James realized that the reality we're currently experiencing, waking reality, is merely a fraction of possible conscious states that exist. And if we prevent ourselves from studying these altered states of consciousness, we will never have a complete understanding of the universe. The psychedelic renaissance is revealing to us the vast amount of power and potential that psychedelics have. And the presence of naturally occurring DMT in the body represents a great unsolved mystery and a tangible link between altered states of consciousness and human physiology. So I suggest we take the advice of William James. Let's adopt the psychedelic experience as a tool to study consciousness. And let's determine if DMT, the only psychedelic known to be produced by humans, plays a role in the most fundamental and important mystery of science, human consciousness. Thank you.
Endeavor, because you really need leather lungs for this. The great problem is that people will cough or not be able to hold it in. You take 2 hits in a situation where your clothes have been loosened and you can just flop backward when you need to. You take 2 hits. Now, many people miss the point, because after 2 hits, you feel completely peculiar. You feel as though your body is undergoing some strange kind of anesthesia. All the air has been pumped out of the room. This is the visual acuity thing I talked about last night. The colors jump up. The edges sharpen. And at that point, people say, whoa, wow, it's really coming on strong. And then what you have to do is you have to take one more enormous hit. And this separates the intrepid from the casual, believe me. Because most people, and the facilitator doesn't want to lean on the person. You say, damn it, take the 3rd hit. And saying, no, I feel completely weird. Say, I know you feel weird, but take the 3rd hit. Well, if you can coax somebody into that, then what happens is you close your eyes and you see the ordinary warm brown back, closed eyelid scenario. And then these colors begin racing together, and it forms this mandalic, floral, slowly rotating thing, which I call the chrysanthemum. This is a place in the trip that you want to see as you go by it. The chrysanthemum forms, and you watch it for like 15 seconds. If it doesn't give way, then you didn't do enough. You have to do more. One more hit usually will do it. Well, then what happens is it like physically propels you through this chrysanthemum-like thing, and there's a sound like a saran wrap bread wrapper being crumpled up and thrown away, that crackle. A friend of mine says, this is your radio intellect leaving through the anterior fontanelle at the top of your head. I don't know what it is, but it's something is being... Yeah, right, that's what it is. And then there's this very defined sense of bursting through something, a membrane. And on the other side, and this is now, remember, my experience, on the other side, as you break through, there's a cheer. There's a whole bunch of entities waiting on the other side. And they, you know that Pink Floyd song, The Gnomes Have Learned a New Way to Say Hooray? Well, it's that place. It's those gnomes. And you burst into this space, and they're saying, how wonderful that you're here. You come so rarely. We're so delighted to see you. And one of the things about DMT that's really puzzling is, in a sense, it doesn't affect your mind. In other words, you don't change. For instance, if you take ketamine, the first thing you notice, the very first thing you notice before the trip hits, is you notice that you no longer are anxious about having taken ketamine. You just sort of, anxiety leaves you. That means it's affecting your mind. It's doing something to the judgmental machinery. DMT doesn't lay a hand on the judgmental machinery. You break through into that space exactly who you were before breaking through. And the usual reaction of most people is something like, you know, and you think, God, heartbeat, normal, pulse, normal, everything's normal, yeah, everything's normal, oh God, because these things are there, and they're hammering at you, and they come forward. They're like jeweled, self-dribbling basketballs. And there are many of them, and they come pounding toward you, and they will stop in front of you and vibrate, but then they do a very disconcerting thing, which is they jump into your body. They jump into your body, and then they jump back out again. And the whole thing is going on in this very high-speed mode, where you're being presented with thousands of details per second, and you can't get a hold on, you say, you know, my God, what's happening? And these things are saying, don't abandon yourself to amazement, which is exactly what you want to do. You just want to go nuts with how crazy this is. They say, don't do that. Don't do that. Pay attention. Pay attention to what we're doing. Well, what are they doing? Well, what they're doing is they're making objects with their voices. They're singing structures into existence. These things are, and what they will do is they'll come toward you, and then, and you have to understand, they don't have arms, so we're kind of downloading this into a lower dimension to even describe it. But what they do is they offer things to you. Say, look at this. Look at this. And as your attention goes toward these objects, you realize that what you're being shown is impossible. It's impossible. It's not simply intricate, beautiful, and hard to manufacture. It's impossible to make these things. The nearest analogy would be to the Fabergé eggs, or something like that. But these things are like the toys that are scattered around the nursery inside a UFO or something. Celestial toys. And the toys themselves appear to be somehow alive. The toys themselves can sing other objects into existence. So what's happening is there's just this proliferation of elf gifts. And the elf gifts are moving around, singing, and the whole thing is directed toward, they're saying, do what we are doing. And they're very insistent. They say, do it, do it, do it. And you feel like a bubble. And now this is subjective. I mean, only 5% report this, but it happens to me. You feel like some kind of bubble inside your body that's beginning to move up toward your mouth. And when it comes out, it isn't sound, it's vision. You discover that you can pump stuff out of your mouth by singing. And they're urging you to do this. They say, that's it, keep doing it. And the whole thing is like we're now at minute 4.5 with this stuff. And you speak in a kind of glossolalia. There's a spontaneous outpouring of syntax unaccompanied by what is normally called meaning. It's sort of, he ding wow wak saptivi muldektipi tinget wahaksiki pipinem wahavedektam bohagagetek. And this is accompanied by a modality, something seen. And they're saying, yes, do it, do it, do it. And then after a minute or so of this, the whole thing begins to collapse in on itself. And they literally begin to physically move away from you. And usually their final shot is they actually wave goodbye and they say, déjà vu, déjà vu, which makes no sense at all if you analyze it. So then you come down, and you're now at minute 6 to 7, and you come down, and it's like being more loaded than you've ever been. It's like about a 700 mic acid trip, but you embrace it as totally down. You say, I'm totally down. I mean, you look like a termite from Arcturus, and the room is decorated in Amish quilts, but I'm completely back. And then, over a minute or a minute and a half or so, the room just comes right back together, and 4 minutes after that, some people can give no account of it whatsoever. They just say, I don't know. It was the weirdest thing that ever happened to me, and I can't remember it now. As far as DMT is concerned, Ayahuasca Is Driven by DMT. What made me go to the Amazon was I first encountered DMT in the underground in Berkeley in 1967, and I was absolutely amazed. I mean, I had already taken LSD, but for me and to this moment, DMT is just the most amazing thing in the universe. I mean, it shouldn't exist. It's impossible. And every time I do it, I come down, I say, this is impossible. I mean, to call that a drug? What a joke. I mean, it just masquerades as a drug. It's not a drug. That's preposterous. The problem with DMT is its incredible power, that only the most intrepid can form any coherent impression whatsoever of what's going on if it's a strong trip. I mean, there are sub-threshold trips where you just graze the tummy of the beast, and then people come down with various models of archetypal closure with the cosmic carnival. That's the archetype of DMT, is the cosmic circus. But if you actually get a strong hit of it, which is in no way dangerous, but simply a true boundary dissolving hit, it's into some place. It's almost like, I once said, there's danger of death by astonishment. And I think that's true. That's the major danger, is death by astonishment. Because you just get in there and you say, my God, I thought I had some expectation of what was possible, and instead this is just so blown out, and it somewhat freaks me out, I have to confess. It is so alien, so huge, so complete in itself, so unrelated to our petty concerns on this planet. I mean, I went to it first as an art historian, and I was a Jungian. I mean, I have Jungian proclivities, and I thought, what does this say about the archetypes? There is no archetype for this. Not in the painting of the Bushman, not in the ecstasies of Hildegard von Bingen, not in the ravings of Mandaean ecstatics. Human spiritual experience never got this deep, never tore open this doorway. And yet what? It's a long toke away for an ordinary human being. How could something that titanic and beautiful and cosmic and alien be kept secret, when what we do is we seek in all corners, in all times and places, for the bizarre, the outre, the unthinkable? We're always turning over rocks, secret teachings, ancient cities, buried ruins, lost tribes, you name it. Well then, here is this thing which is like the absolute quintessence of what all those things are aiming for. More stunning than the rise of Atlantis from the Atlantic seaboard is a toke of DMT. More appalling than the arrival of alien star fleets in the skies of our planet. And yet, it's here. It's here. And I don't often invoke it. I mean, for me to talk about it is to invoke it, because it's weird to talk about it, because it reminds me that we don't know what we're doing at all, that we sit in rooms discussing all this stuff, and a war rages, ignorant armies clash by night, that whole thing. But this extraordinarily powerful thing, the depth of which, the measure of which is so hard to take, lies very near. What I had hoped for from ayahuasca was my brother and I, when we got into this DMT stuff, we said, we've got to slow down this movie. I mean, you get in there for about 70 seconds, the first 35 of which is taken up with you checking all your meters to make sure you're not dead. Because that's what you assume. You say, I did it, I'm dead, fuck it, I'm dead. And then you say, but chest rising and falling, thoughts continuing in linear apparently I'm not dead. Apparently I'm something else. Well, then by the time you sort it out, you're usually coming down. And people come down babbling, raving. I mean, I've seen, people who've headed mega corporations, people who are accustomed to ordering hundreds of people around, just completely come apart because it is so unexpected. So our notion was slow the movie down, get in there. And ayahuasca looks like a strategy for doing that. And we couldn't imagine, can you picture people wearing penis sheaths and painting themselves with red ochre, and they have this, and this is what they're doing? And then it makes the whole notion of history seem crazy. I mean, we're primitives because we diddle around with atom smashers and stealth bombers and stuff like that. I mean, and these people have this other thing, so of course they don't wear clothes, build up. Would you? And largely, I would say, what we've learned from 25 years of dealing with this is that our strategy was right. Ayahuasca will let you in to these places, and so will psilocybin. What I've decided, based on experience, is that what I'm interested in is a very tiny subset of all the smorgasbord of possible altered states and experiences that life and nature offer up. That there are many altered states, datura, ketamine, MDMA, endlessly, and then states brought on by ordeal and fasting and meditation. I am only interested as a phenomenologist, definitely more with the attitude of the scientist than some kind of conclusion drawer. I'm interested in this very circumscribed area in organic nature because it's not supposed to be there, folks. It's like a little a doorway into the previous universe or something. The whole, at the height of Islam in the 10th century, the poets of the Mughal dynasty said of the city of Isfahan in Iran, because of its mosques and architecture, that it was half the world. The Isfahan is half the world. DMT is half the world. The shiny, bright, active, exfoliating and bizarre part. Well, then we then are poised in this strange dimension of diminished possibility. Where are we? What is that? What is it to possess a body such that you can use it as an instrument to turn on and off these places? How does it reflect on the quest for understanding of the here and now? How does it reflect on the quest for, immortality or enlightenment or a sense of fitting in to the cosmic purpose? I don't know. I mean, one can play a reductionist game and say that the human brain mind system is an alarm clock. DMT is a hammer. Hit the alarm clock with the hammer and you learn all about gears because they spring out and become visible. But and this is how science works. This is the scientific method. Smash it, then count the pieces. Find the bigger pieces, find the littlest pieces, smash them. Count the pieces, find the little pieces, smash them. That's how it proceeds. Well, obviously, that's not going to take us too far in this domain because it's entirely made up of structure, of connection, of relationship, of thought. And because I'm concerned about the planet and the predicament we're in and the way we spend our resources and cheat our children of a sane future and all that, I keep trying to reconnect this back into the human world. But I frankly don't know whether that can be done. Another area I work in is I try to connect it up to the perennial philosophies of humanity, Zen and Buddhism and shamanism. I don't know whether that can be done. The shamans that I have gotten really close to have not been, I would not call, they were able to cure people, but they had no pretension of spiritual accomplishment. They weren't even interested in that. They were interested in what they would call understanding, the same thing which drives a scientist. They say, Don Fidel, who I took most of my ayahuasca with, we would take it on Saturday nights with a group of about 40 people and cure, and then we would take it on Wednesday nights, just he and I or a couple of other people, and that was for learning. He always said, and he said, you can't cure unless you learn.